I still love this intro. I'm always like that guy that wants to improve things, but I really just like that intro. Um, I'm biased though because I created it, right? So like I'm a little biased towards it, but it's awesome. It gets you hyped, to get you in the mood. My dog's in the background making my camera go a little crazy right now. Anyway, so tonight's a good night. Tonight we have Austin Jackson, the man, the myth, the legend. If you guys didn't know, put in the chats. His birthday just passed. Happy birthday to this man, Austin Jackson. You there? Hey, what's up?
Oh, you don't put me on the spot
I put
now.
you.
The birthday shout
I
outs.
did. I did the
Thank you
birthday
so
shout out, bro.
much.
You deserve the love. You deserve the love.
I appreciate it. Shout out to the AV Educate community. It is good to be back. I apologize for the weeks that I missed, but the industry has been busy. And thank you again. I'm gonna put you on the spot, Omar. Thank you for driving up and celebrating my
Oh,
birthday
for sure,
with
for
me.
sure.
On the behalf of the entire AV Educate community, it was a pleasure to have you guys here. So
Nah, it was a good night. It was a good night. We had some good food, some good times, some good drinks, some good laughs. It was definitely worth the drive, man. I got to stay out there with my girl at
absolutely.
the hotel down the street. It was a cool little. Actually, it was a badass hotel. Honestly, for like, hey, let's just get something close by. No big deal. It was dope. So it was all
See,
around
it's
worth
always
it.
an event.
Always an event, yeah. But you got to make it fun, right? So anyways,
Absolutely.
let me get on track. I know you guys aren't here to talk about. You're not here to talk to us about our personal stuff, right? We're here to talk about freelancing versus employees. And last week, just to kind of go over some stuff, we got deep into the AB5 in California. We got deep into some pros and cons between being a full-time employee and being a freelancer. We kind of got a little dark, right? We got a little dark with talking about some of the things about the business side of being a freelancer and the kind of consistent paperwork and the back end work with the QuickBooks and the invoicing and the accounting. So we lightened it up a little bit near the end, but you know how this conversation goes. Everybody who's with us tonight, you kind of guide us, right? And I'll put a little reminder there at the bottom for you too. But everybody's guide you guide the conversation here tonight. So really, it's part two, which is a continued conversation of what was asked for of us, and it's the pros and cons of being a freelancer versus an employee. And Austin, what's your initial input on that when it comes to being a freelancer versus an employee? What would you say is your initial input on that?
Oh, I can't let the cat out of the bag already,
All right,
man.
all right, all right.
And I will tell you this. Coming from me, there's absolutely no bias. I know what it's like to be a W-2 employee. I know what it's like to receive all the pros and cons in terms of your benefits and things of the sort, maybe knowing where your next paycheck is coming from. But I also know what it's like to be a freelancer and have the the capability to create your own schedule, to not have a maybe a certain cap on your income. I
Yep.
also know what I own a labor company, so I know what it's like to provide for 1099 contractors, and I know 1099 contractors who work almost as if they're W-2 employees because there's so much work out there.
Yep.
So there's pros and cons to both sides. But I am interested in hearing what the community has to say. And if you guys have any questions at all, I'll be more than happy to chime in with my input if I can help at all.
For sure,
So
for sure. So, just a quick reminder right now, we're about 5 minutes into the show. We just dropped a link there. If you guys want to join us live on the show, give your input or just be live with us on the conversation, there's a link there. It'll bring you to the backstage with us real quick. We'll get you ready in the background, and then you kind of go live with us. And your input and insights are super valuable to her tonight. I promise you, people are watching, people are listening. It's just a learning experience. So, I'll kind of start off on a little thing here about freelancing that we talked about last week that I thought. Was kind of the kickoff to all this, right? Is that when you're a full-time employee, and it was mentioned in the comments as well, when you're a full-time employee, you get to negotiate once a year if you're lucky, but essentially that one time, that initial entry point is when you get to negotiate that rate. As a freelancer or independent contractor or business owner, you get to do that every show or every client you get, and every 6 months to a year, you can renegotiate that. Most of the guys that I know will either do a flat rate or they'll do based off of certain job types, certain skill sets, and they'll do it per show. So I may be doing shading on one show, and I may be running an aqualon on the next show, and my rates might be different for that. Maybe I charge 450 for one and 650 for another. I may be a TD on a show or producer on a show. Maybe those are 750 rates versus 450 rate for different things. And again, those are things that you should have a price list for. One of the things we didn't talk about too much when it comes to the freelancer side is that when you're an employee, you're kind of the everything guy in that department, right? And depending on how big the company is, you may be isolated to maybe one part of that department. So if you, let's say, your audio and you have enough employees around with you, maybe you just work on the consoles and that's all you focus on. But if you're in a smaller company, or most companies, in my opinion, are smaller staffed, right? Maybe you're the video guy for the company. So you do all the video, the cameras, the projectors, the LED walls, the switchers, the media servers, like you handle all that stuff. Seems a little bit more typical. In that scenario, you're going to get a set rate. You get told where to go, when to be there, and what's going on. And there's no ands, if, or buts about it. As a freelancer, you can kind of change your market a little bit there. What would you say you've noticed in the industry, Austin, as far as when it comes between, and that doesn't have to be video, it could be audio or lighting. But I'm a video guy, so obviously that's where I go to first all the time. What would you say is your take on that when it comes to freelance versus full-time employees in departments, and when it comes to that initial kind of, that initial conversation with the salaries, right? Like, hey, this is the salary I want to offer you. Do you take it? Yes or no? You do your negotiations. Hopefully you're doing your negotiations versus when you're a freelancer and you're kind of doing that on a show per sure basis.
So I think one of the important parts that you just touched based on is negotiations, right? Because theoretically, that's where things start. But when it comes down to negotiations, we have to make sure that we have the right information that we're going back and forth on. So one of the questions that any good technician is going to ask either is going to be, what gear is going to be involved into whatever this position is required, and exactly what the requirements are. Now, the difference in what Omar was saying is not just a negotiation on a per show basis or for the year, is when you get hired, period, from whomever, if you're actually in the proper onboarding process, you should know exactly what the expectations and the requirements are for a said position. So when you get onboarded as a W-2 employee, they're going to let you know, hey, this is what we're expecting. We may need you to QC some gear. We may need you to come in and help out in the warehouse if we're super busy. We may need you to come in and do some pre-production or whatever the case is, then go out on show site, because these are the requirements that it takes to fulfill the job. More so as a 1099 contractor, they're going to call you in to fulfill one said position, so to speak. Now, I use that term very loosely, and I say that because they're not theoretically going to call you in to do things in the shop or and things of the sort. They're going to call you in more so for what's required on show site. But the reason why I corrected myself is because, going back to like what you just said, Omar, is what we are seeing now on show site required of W-2 or 1099 contractors is that Swiss Army knife, that multiple skill set person. So the same person could be switching and doing camera switching as well. Somebody else could be doing Zoom, Playback Pro, and graphics, or whatever the case is. But that one position does still have multiple layers and multiple requirements. So, but going back to that negotiation phase to figure out it's what the expectations are versus what they may be over a long-term contract over the course of 6 months or a year as a W-2 employee or on a per show basis.
No, I love it. And I want to bring something else to the attention here for the guys that are watching here that maybe are thinking about that full-time side. One of the things I want to mention, and I have a speaker that'll come in and kind of hopefully dive into a little more of that, but one thing I want to mention too is that one of the benefits of being full-time is that there's always work, right? Whether you have a show or not, there's still work to be done, and you're getting paid for it. So there's more security in that, and some people may need that. If you have a family and you can't risk those 30-day long period waits, 30, 60, 90-day waits, 45-day waits, whatever it might be, if you can't risk that initial wait time, or if it's like, hey, I need that steady income because I got bills, I got a mortgage, I got a family. Being full-time is a blessing sometimes, and it's not always a curse, especially if you're with the right company, making the right money. And the reason I say that is because also the caveat to all this here tonight is that, and I'm going to bring up Scott Monroe in just a moment here. This is a man that you want to know because he is a full-time guy, and he's going to get you as a freelancer work. So you want to be a freelancer because you want to make that money, but you need to know that guy that's full-time who's going to get you that work, right? Because you're not getting it right off the bat. You have to build that clientele first, and it takes time. And at a certain point, you will have a clientele list of your own. But until then, you need Austin Jackson, you need Scott Monroe's, you need gentlemen like this who can get you the work, because it's not just going to be there and fall in your lap unless you already have the clientele. And even to get to that point, it takes a couple of years. Real quick for myself, I did 6 years full time right out of the military, and then did another 3. I'm sorry, not even 3. Did another year, 6 months to a year as stagehand after I left that company, even though I was a lead video engineer, just to kind of get out there on my own and create my own clientele list. But again, this was something that I worked with. There was a full-time guy at a labor company who got me work. And after that, after about six months to a year, I was able to kind of go out on my own and have more clientele that I was able to talk to directly, which again, these were guys that worked full time that I worked for because I needed extra people to come in. And that's where I came in as a freelancer. So it behooves us. I'm going to stop moving my hands so much. The camera's going crazy. It behooves us to know people that are full time because that's how we get work essentially. And they're the ones who are going to know who you are and who to call. So anyways, I'm done talking. I'm going to bring in Scott now. Scott, you hear us?
Yeah, how you guys doing?
Good. How you doing?
Great. Happy to have you back, Scott.
Thanks, Austin. How you been?
I cannot complain. Busy. So.
Absolutely. It's crazy out there. Well, yeah, full-time versus freelance. I remember this from last week. Yeah,
100%.
Definitely a great topic, guys. And I'm glad you guys brought that up because, as you guys are saying, there's definitely a tremendous advantage to both. And depending, like Omar says, what you're actually looking for, one or the other may be the perfect choice for you. So let's talk a little bit about the full-time side. Full-time, the obvious benefits, stability. We as humans need stability. It's difficult to be out there in the freelance world and watch your income do this. And, if you are the type of person who really needs that stability, I highly recommend that you lock in with a local production company. One of the cool benefits of being locked in with a production company is the fact that obviously you have that steady income that you can plan around. You have vacation days, which you really don't have vacation days as a freelancer. Now, yes, you can take any day you want off, but you're probably not getting paid for it. Obviously, the other advantages are training. As a freelancer, you're kind of left to your own. And thank God for AB Educate that you have a place to go and train. But if you are full-time, you get to put your hands on that gear. You get to actually use it on a show site. And you are actually going to be put on shows quicker as a full-timer than you would be a freelancer when you are just learning new gear. So think about it that way. And then obviously the upward mobility that you will have with a company. You may walk in as a warehouse tech and work your way all the way up to eventually maybe a project manager and account manager. So, there's definitely pros and cons to both. And again, if stability is your key, that's where I would go is with the full timers.
Yeah, and you bring up a very good point here that I didn't even bring up. So, AV Educate, thanks you for mentioning us. We are a resource for freelancers, but there's a benefit, right? That when you are full time, your employee is going to offer these training courses for you at no cost. Versus when you're a freelancer, a lot of times to get certifications from the manufacturers or to get any kind of training, you either have to partner with somebody who hopefully uses you a lot and trusted you in their warehouse with their gear, or you have to go out and pay for it. And a lot of times, myself included, I will go out and every year, at least every year, pay for one class, no matter how difficult it is to schedule, whatever the case may be. I will go out and I'll pay for that class because I want to keep everything kind of at the forefront of my skill set and my knowledge, and I want to constantly push it. But while I'm saying that here, I have another gentleman I want to bring into the conversation. Pete, are you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Awesome. Okay. Good evening, everyone.
Evening.
Good evening, Pete.
So what is your opinion, Pete, between freelance and full time? Let's hear your side.
Well, I tell you something. A lot of people who end up in the full-time world start freelancing. I live up here in Portland, Maine. There's a couple of local colleges that have film schools, for lack of a better term, that educate people on camera work, editing, producing, all the stuff behind the scenes. And a lot of people I know started there and worked their way into a job either at a television station or with a local video company or something like that. So, and eventually, working full-time or even part-time is great because you get the hands-on knowledge and things like that. I learned it when I was in high school as an internship. A local cable TV company had set me up as an intern, and eventually I got a job part-time with them, just doing all sorts of local TV work.
I like it. I like it. Well, I was almost going to post it, but I'll tell you guys now while I still try to post it. How many of you out there started off as an internship or in high school doing AV? One of the craziest things is, and I have a comment from Ryan Wade I want to let Austin touch on. One of the craziest things about this industry is a lot of the times, and not so much I would say now, but still, well, I would say 50-50. A lot of guys fall into this industry, right? So the fact that you had the experience in high school to know that this existed, right, to an extent, right? Because corporate and theater, we know those are out there, but corporate AV, live concerts, people don't always think this is a job. They think it's a halfway thing, and it's like, no, this, you can make a career out of this. You can make a living and make money and do it very well. But I like the way you worded that, because I remember growing up, me being second generation, this is all I wanted to do. Like this was it. And if I didn't do this, I don't know what I was going to do. But I was like you in high school. I did stuff all the time, and I was motivated to go down this path. So I was doing theater, I was doing a broadcast, and then even then, when I got into the industry, it wasn't enough, right? It was like, yeah, I learned this side of the industry, but this is another side that I work in a lot. So it's definitely an eye opener when it comes to things like that. And Austin, I'll let you read this one here that Ryan posted. I'd love to hear your input on this.
So Ryan brought up what I thought was a great comment. I sidebar and I was looking at it. He said, I think our business lends itself to both. I really think full-time is a great place to build yourself and skill set. Once you get to a point where you feel like you have learned as much as that business gives you the chance to, it's great to have the opportunity to look at going freelance. So I believe in what Ryan said 100%. But in contrary, I've actually seen it work both ways. I've seen guys who's freelance and they've gotten themselves dirty, and they've gotten themselves to the point where they got themselves into just enough trouble where they start to develop a skill set in a certain position, start to develop themselves more, and they said, hey, look, like Scott said, I'm looking for a little bit more stability. And a lot of times it may not even be because of said technician, but more so for said technicians' requirements of their families and things of the sort. They try to meet those other accommodations, so they look to full-time so that they can have those set schedules. However, on the reverse side, there's a lot of techs who go through coming up by becoming a full-time employee. Right back to what Scott said again, going into the point where you're in the warehouse, you're touching gear, you're getting familiar with lingo, with terminology, with what gear may be. You get yourself to the point where you go out on show site, you start doing a little bit more. You work your way up to you're becoming a little bit more knowledgeable. You're in a tech position, and you start climbing the ladders until you realize, like, hey, I've developed a certain skill set in said position, and there's a high demand and requirement. I don't need so much stability, but I can go out and there may be a lot more opportunity for me. I want to go out and I want to test the waters. It happens a lot. Now, big time positions, those guys are traveling because they're meeting the accommodations of numerous clients as opposed to just working full time for one. So the reason why we're here is because there's pros and cons to both sides, but there's ways to come up and advance in both directions as well. So,
no, 100%. And speaking of pros and cons, Scott, I got a great one from you from Salvador here. Salvador asks, what do you think of freelance versus business owner versus consultant?
I honestly believe that starting off, as Pete said, starting off in the employed side first so you can learn the business. But I think all of us here, I don't know Pete that well, but all of us here are entrepreneurs at one shape or form or another. And moving into the entrepreneurship is definitely where the money's at. But you have to have a strong foundation to go out there and do that, because, if you think about our business, we do a great job of teaching folks technical skills, i.e. AV Educate. We do that. We get those skills and we go out, we do a great job. But one of the things that our industry doesn't do that I know of is teach us how to be owners, how to act like an owner, how to think like an owner. And if you can get yourself to that level, and you definitely will notice the difference in income when you get there. And if that's your thing, if you want a higher level of income than working for somebody or just working as a freelancer, business ownership is the way to go. but there is a whole lot attached to that in terms of stress, liability, and time away from your family, if that's something you're willing to sacrifice to get there.
Time away from the family is a big one in our industry. A lot
Yes,
of guys
sir.
struggle with, and myself included. So that's a whole nother topic for another show. But yeah, you bring a good point.
Can I touch base just to play devil's advocate on
For
that?
sure.
Has anyone else in this panel heard of full-time employees complain about them having to work a lot more hours and maybe not being compensated as well as you know exactly where I'm going with this.
I can tell you a scenario. When I was this was about 6-7 years ago. I had my partner at the time gave birth to a beautiful baby girl who is my beautiful daughter now. I took a full-time job because I thought I needed the stability in my life. I had a love-hate for the job. I did it for a year and I ended up quitting because I was working as much, if not more, doing that job, making less than I would have freelancing. So after a year, we had that talk like, listen, I have zero control of my schedule. I work almost as many hours as I did before. This was no change, and we're making less money now. Like now we're struggling. And then I went freelance and made more money, worked about the same hours. But I was by choice because we had just bought a house and we were moving things around. So there's a lot that goes to that. And 100%, and because it's industry as well, we also separated because I was working too much. But Pete, I got one that came in. I want to bring it to your attention here from Ryan again. Ryan Wade. Let me see if I get the right one here.
Ryan is dropping some bombs.
I know, dropping some bombs tonight. All right, so this is the one I want you to check that. So there are so many benefits of starting out in a full-time role. You have opportunities to meet a ton of people and vendors. When I left my first full-time job, I had connections with a ton of shops, and I met a bunch of freelancers working full-time. So I built connections and was able to use that to be successful as a freelancer. What would you say to that, Pete?
It's great to do. Here in Maine, we have the Maine Film Association, and I'm a member of that. They do events once in a while. It's a great time to network with a lot of people in the film industry. That most of them are local independent filmmakers of various types. But it's networking is the place to, meet people and get your name out there, get their names in case you're working on a project. It's always great. It's always great to have that.
I want to emphasize what Pete just said here. He said one key word that was in a string of words, very beautiful put together. But he said one key word here that I think everybody in this panel right now says a lot to the people we talk to and that we try to educate. Networking is the number one most important thing you can do in this industry.
Absolutely.
Ryan said it in his comments, right? He met a bunch of people, freelancers and vendors that he networked with and got their information. That means he put it down on his phone. And when he needed work he just picked up the phone. Hey, how's it going? What's going on? How you been? Da, 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 da. Oh, by the way, I'm freelancing now. If you ever need anything, just let me know. Cool. Good talking to you. Done. You may get a call that day. You may get a job that day. You may get something. But the point is that you had the ability to make that call and to get work because you have that person's information. That's the biggest thing. Sorry,
I want to say something about working and complaining. People in the motion picture film industry lately in the unions have been complaining about long working hours on set. And it's been a problem where some people, after working 18, 20 hours a day on set, are driving home and falling asleep at the wheel. It's happened before. It's not just in this industry. It's a problem in a lot of industries, actually. And I know in the big film world, they're all started the ball on talking about long working hours. And transportation industries, they have set working hours they have to go by. Federal law here in the United States. So that could be something coming down the road, not just for live events or film, TV, video, whatever you want to call it. It could happen down the road.
So what I do know, just to deep dive a little bit further on that, was before the transportation industry didn't have those requirements at all. Now these truck drivers are, I think they have 11 hours of drive time and only 14 hours that they could be on shift, and everything is being monitored through electronic load detectors to make sure that they're not moving or anything of the sort. But what I feel happened with that is the amount of safety that came to play or that was at risk by putting these tired truck drivers and these guys driving these really long hauls with these really long days. But I know that in our industry, we definitely have some long days. We actually had a show just running last week in Tampa that we had, I think, one day, the first day was 10 hours, and then every other day was 12, 15, 18 hours. So some really long days. And I don't know what the future of the industry will change because of things of the sort. But I think that if a technician is going to be working those extremely long hours, especially on back-to-back shifts, it's important that a technician it has at least those 8-hour breaks between shifts, and that technician is kind of staying pretty close to said venue unless they're staying at the facility. Because even if you have 8 hours between, but you have an hour of drive time and an hour of drive time to come back, that only gives you 6 hours to play with, and then you still got to get ready, clean up and things of the sorts between then. So I think just making sure that there's better accommodations to take care of technicians, whether they're freelancers, whether they're full-time employees, regardless, because their safety, their lives are at risk in situations like that. So
it is. It's my thoughts in it is 12 hours off duty from one day to the next. If you ask any doctor who knows anything about sleep, 8 hours of sleep you need per day. Now, if you work 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. and then the boss says, come back for the overnight 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., that's 8 hours off, but that's not 8 hours sleep, like Austin was just saying. People got to drive, people got to wind down, people got to get ready the next day.
But at the end of the day, though, we are hired, especially as independent contractors, to take care of such jobs. Owners, project managers, whomever is bringing us aboard, they're hiring us to complete a certain mission. So we know what certain stipulations and things will be required for such job to get done. So we have to agree to these things ahead of time. And not only that is, at the end of the day, all of us are grown men and women in this industry. None of us are children, so we have to make such decisions. But as in Scott's words, act like an owner, think like an owner. If this were your show, you want to make sure that you guys have a team of dedicated employees, people who's going to work to make sure that the job gets done. I understand the accommodation of having or wanting 12 hours between shifts, but in a perfect world, but perception and reality, I guess, defines what a perfect world to each and every one of us. So
I really like what you said there. Act like an owner, think like an owner. That just flows, and it's so true when you really think about that process there. So I got one that came here from the community real quick, and I'll leave it to the panel to decide who wants to take this. So Salvador Gazira says, full-time contracting is another interesting blend between freelancer and full-time employee. I'd love to hear someone's perception on that, because I have my own, but I'd love to hear you guys first. And if not, I'll take it. That's all right. I'll take it. Listen, I'll take it. I love it. So here's the deal. As a business owner, right? At least I think I'm one, at least, right? So I'm halfway there. In that position, if I get a full-time deal, and it's usually I've done this a couple of times with a couple of clients of mine. I did it once with a good friend of mine who ran a business, and he needed some help starting up. We made a deal for about 3 months. So I was off the market for 3 months. I got paid a rate that was about what I would have got paid regardless of my schedule for that time of the year. But I was in the warehouse a lot, and the downside was I was now kind of like an employee full time. But the for me, it was like I'm still making what I would have made regardless. Helping a friend out here, who I'm still friends with now. His business is doing great, even during the pandemic was doing great. So I was glad to be a part of that growth with him. And that little time period that we worked together, I had to turn down a lot of work, which is true. But I also prepared myself and my existing clients saying, hey, by the way, I'm on a contract for XYZ. 30 days before that contract was done, I was reaching out already to my clients. Hey, just so you know, after this, I'm free again. And I was sending out what I use, which is called an availability report, so that my clients knew, hey, after this month, I'm available all these dates. Before my 30 days, before my 3 months with that guy were done, I had my whole year booked out because my clients were like, oh, you're available? Done. I got it. It didn't affect me as much as I thought it would. I thought it would slow things down for me a little bit, but I was like, you know what? He's a really good friend of mine. I grew up with this guy. He's starting his AV business. He's doing great. He just needs an extra person. The money's decent. The warehouse stuff, it is what it is. And I did it, and it worked out great. I did it another time a couple years later with another company that I worked for. Ended up doing it for about 4 months. 1 month off in between that. Ended up going full time with that guy, making about what I would make as a freelancer. And I got a business credit card from him for my expenses. So when you added it out, it was still pretty close to what I was doing, and I was appreciative of it. And for me, it worked out very well because it was a win-win situation for me and that person. And I think it was very interesting. Now, on the flip side to that, when PSAV and Encore, when PSAV and SAV were doing a merger thing and they wanted to bring me as a permalancer, it was something I turned away because the money just wasn't there. And it was literally that scenario. However, on the flip side to that, I would get work through third-party vendors for the same venues as that I turned down for the rate at almost my full rate through a third-party vendor. But because to go directly with them, they had to give this particular pay grade. And I was like, I won't do it for that little. Which again, I didn't understand. If you could pay this guy, I know what the rates are, and still get me close to my pay rate. How is it if me going directly to you and cutting the middle person out, you're gonna now go a quarter of what I'm asking for? And and even when I tried to negotiate, it wasn't worth it. So for me, it's like, how close are you to this client? How much benefit is it really? When my buddy was starting his business up, it was a good insight for me to also learn the business from a startup perspective. Because I'm second generation, so I've seen it as a success already, but I wasn't there for the startup of it. Now with his side, I got the perception of what it is to start up a business and what it takes, right? And it's a lot of work. Let me tell you that. All right. Any business you do is a lot of work, but in AV, you think as a freelancer, the paperwork side and the business side is a lot of work. Wait till you start getting clients who have shows coming up, and you have to do CADs, you have to do quotes, you have to do pools, you got to do modifications to those things. And you also, on top of that, have a bunch of other clients who are asking for the same stuff. Show's not available yet. And then when you're a small team, you got to pool your show, drive your show. Like Pete was saying earlier, late nights, early mornings, that just becomes the norm because you got to get the show done. And there might be times where you're not billing for those things because it's just me and one other dude, and I got to make profit. So I'm gonna eat it. I'm gonna eat the costs on the OT just to make sure it gets there on time or XYZ. Oh, and then on top of that, he was doing, which again, he did it. Mad respect, he did it well. Hey, I'm gonna run this show with you guys. Don't worry about it. And he's in the side all day. Talk to the next client, right? So he wasn't really there, but he was, right. He was a body there that was getting billed for, but he wasn't there because he's on the phone. So there was things like that. And then the second time I did it, the company I did it for the second time, the gentleman that I worked for was just a very well known, super knowledgeable video engineer, super talented, super smart, beyond what my skill set was at the time. And I wanted to learn from him. So I was like, you know what? I'll do this here. I helped this business grow a lot. Him and his partner. His partner was also a mad genius when it came to audio. So I learned a lot from him as well. They use a lot of like L Acoustics, Panasonic, and high-end stuff that I got to use once in a while. And it was like, now I get to use stuff all the time, and I got to really get hands-on with it and play with it. And it goes back to what Scott and Austin were saying earlier, where being full-time has the advantages of there's gear everywhere there's training everywhere involved. You get to really get the hands-on with it. As a freelancer, it's like, I got to kind of go in. Hopefully they let me in. I got to do it on their time frame, which may not work with my time frame because I might make work that day. But I ended up learning a lot from that client. And then going full-time, I learned even more about the business side. Right, from a middle perspective, I learned more about the nitty-gritty of how things run. I learned more about just video in general, which is what I really wanted to learn. And I learned from someone who I had a lot of respect for. So those are the 2 times I did that. And like Ryan had said in his comments here, we're in an industry where that is kind of okay and acceptable, right? There are others that they'd see you as competition or whatever. And those clients to this day, even the one I worked for when I first started industry, right, for 6 years that I worked for, when I left them, they still hired me as a freelancer. How many companies can you say that you could do that for that would still do that? No,
That's
I mean,
true.
not even companies, just industries in general, right? I don't see a lot of drivers quitting and then that same company hiring them as a freelancer.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, don't worry, we'll take care of it. So anyways, that's my long drawn out 2 cents on that. Just because I've had that personal experience, and I think it works out great as long as the money's there, and you're not just there for the. Sorry, I say the money, yes, but as long as that's not the only reason you're there for, there's lots of benefits to come with that knowledge set. And honestly, those things that I did when I was like a permanencer essentially has helped me in my own business, because I was able to see that's the stuff it takes. This is what it takes. Hey, this maybe I don't want to do that stuff, or maybe I do want to do this stuff. Maybe I want to take these dives. I got to really get to nitty gritty of what it takes, the risk factors, the payoffs, things like that. So it was an interesting ride, and I definitely would do it again if the scenario was right. Like, for example, if it benefited AV Educate right now, why not, right? If I could give out more to the community, make better connections, make better contacts, make better leeway with the community, so that you guys can learn more quicker or better or more, more influential, maybe backed by industry standard stuff. Why wouldn't I go down that route, right? It would just make sense.
Understood. I mean, there's always, like I said, there's pros and cons to everything, and I don't want anyone to believe that going either way is wrong. There's ups and there's downs. Another thing that I know a lot of 1099 contractors may feel a little disheartened about is slow season. Now for some, slow season may not exist, but for others, they may say, okay, well, in a certain point in time in the summer, I tend to have less shows and things of the sort. So back to that stability point, back to that point that even if they don't have shows, at least you still have a paycheck coming in, whether you are a W-2 employee, whether you are on salary or you're hourly, whatever the case is. Maybe you need to come and spend a little bit more time in the shop. Now you're actually getting paid because you're on the clock to learn, to spend more time with gear, preparing yourself to do more in future positions on show site. Now you have to think of it really. If I'm spending time in the warehouse on my downtime and getting paid for this, educating myself, developing my skill set, and later on down the road in my career, I said, you know what? I want to freelance. You got paid to educate yourself throughout that entire time. So there is so much upside on both sides to it. And how many permalancers or freelancers built relationships to the point where they want to go in to develop their skill sets inside of the warehouse, inside of the shop, whatever the case is, so that they can become permalancers with said companies.
100%. What about you, Scott? What about you and Pete? What do you guys think?
I wanted to touch on what Pete and Austin were saying earlier about the long hours. Now, here's part of our business that many of us don't know, that when you contract somebody or you hire them full time, you actually can be held accountable for their transition to and from work. So you get into that scenario where Pete was talking about, where the person falls asleep at the wheel and you're the labor company that hired them, you could be potentially liable as well. And that's the thing you need to keep an eye on. And I totally agree with Pete and Austin that we need to take a look at how many hours we're putting people through every day to make sure that they get home safely and they return safely. But more importantly, that we're able to have an environment where we not only have a successful show, but everybody's happy and want to be there. Thank you.
I used to work in the railroad industry and witnessed, on the TV news, we've all many accidents that have happened here and there.
Did we lose it?
Yeah, I think
we lost him.
Awesome.
Pete, I think we lost you. We're doing it live. See, now you guys know this isn't recorded. It's true. People be questioning me sometimes.
So Ryan brought up a comment where he said, slow time is a great time for vacation and getting yourself ready for the next busy season. In a normal year, I take around 3 months off, but the other 9 months, I'm really going hard and building that bank for the off season. So that brings up a great point. Whereas a freelancer, we talked about paperwork earlier, right? So we have to make sure that as a business owner, that we are budgeting and making sure that we're setting ourselves up for that slow season, for those months where the income may not be as high, because we have to account for the rainy days. So budgeting, making sure that you're staying on top of your bookkeeping, making sure you're staying on top of your scheduling. So there is more that goes involved with being a freelancer. So don't think that, yeah, it's just an opportunity, I'm gonna make more money, woohoo. Yes, but there's responsibilities and things that come with it. Also making sure that you're setting aside for your taxes. As a W-2 employee, taxes are automatically taken out at the end of the year. You get your W-2s and you go from there. As a 1099 contractor, did you set aside your budget and things for taxes? Are you making sure you're keeping up with that every 3 months? Things of the sort like that. So again, pros and cons to both sides.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Austin was saying, financial literacy is something that we all kind of want to make sure we put a little bit of focus on, as well as our technical skills, because if you really understand the flow of money, how it works and how to invest it, and what adds value to your portfolio, what takes away from it, it'll help you make better decisions. And it's funny, if you just cut back on a few of the things that don't add value to your portfolio, you'll be surprised what you can have left over in the bank. And then if you have that money working for you while you're working, it'll make it easier to smooth out those little peaks and valleys, in our, how would you say, throughout the course of the year.
Yep. Sorry about that, guys. I was trying to talk to Pete here. Pete's still with us, everybody. So it might be on my end here. So I'm sorting something out real quick here with Pete to see if it's my fault. So I apologize for that.
Help.
Again, doing it live. So I'm mitigating in the background here as we're trying to do this. I did see another comment that came in real quick.
We got two from Lewis.
There was one that came from Ryan above that I want to say we just didn't hit on, which was this one. I don't believe we hit on this one. So with the big AV companies, the rate is determined by all the full-time employees they have that don't have billable jobs. The overhead at the large companies is supported by the people in the site working. And I can kind of touch on that if you guys want to, or does someone want to jump on that?
Yeah, deep dive on that for me, if you will.
So what Ryan is explaining here is that when you work at a company, there are people that are getting paid, right? There's an accountant person, there is a project manager that gets paid. Now, unlike lawyers, for example, who can bill you hourly or can bill you, per second, per whatever the situation is. In the AV world, that project manager will include a percentage of his fees into the total billing of it. So let's say something costs $10, right? Because the project manager worked on this, he adds an additional percentage on that. And we'll just say for easy numbers, another $10. So the real bill is $10. There's another $10 added to that bill, which is now $20 to the end client. However, there's also other people that need to work, right? So the labor coordinator needs to do a job. The HR person needs to do a job. The accounting person needs to do a job. That has to also get billed. The building that you're in needs to get billed for. Those numbers need to be calculated, right, and divided among shows into the quotes that are happening. So a part of your rate, so they may be charging or paying you anywhere from $15 to $35 an hour, maybe even $45, whatever the case is. But your client might be getting billed $75 an hour or $100 an hour, $80 an hour, whatever the case is, to make up the difference so that a percentage of that money goes back into the company, not towards profit for the company, but towards paying the people who aren't on site that still get paid, right? So your billable hours become part of the equation for what people need in order to get them to get paid on time. So there's this kind of round robin. And what's interesting to see with different companies is that some companies will separate gear expenses versus labor expenses. And this could be a whole nother conversation for another topic, but there are things like the cost to the company for gear staying on the shelves. And this is big in the retail world where they kind of have to move things around. So if you're in retail or if you've ever done retail, you know about some of these numbers here, and I won't get into them just because it's not really what we're diving into here today. But the gear that goes out, a percentage of that has to also cover the expense of the building, right? So that gear may have costed the company, let's say $300. They charge it's a 3x thing for there, but let's say they charge, okay, so this costs me $300. I want to do within 12 shows, I want it to get paid off. So I'm just a quick math for you here right now. Take my calculator. So $300 divided by 12 is $25, right? So every time this goes out, it's going to cost $25 to make back what I lost on it. After my 12th rental, it makes profit. However, I still need it, as this takes up shelf space. My shelf space costs me $5 a day. So now I got to add another $5 on that. Hopefully that goes out every day or recurring times. And again, these are low numbers, but it costs me $5 to put on the shelf in that position. And then on top of that, I want to factor in the truck that it's driving, right? So I want to factor in the driver, the gas, the insurance, where it's parked at, right? That's expensive. It's just sitting there. I also want to I want to factor in maintenance. I know it's going to cost me about $5,000 a year for general maintenance of this truck, not including anything that happens outside of that. So I want to factor it into every time the truck goes out. A percentage of that is getting paid by my client for that transportation. So now there's a fee for that truck delivery, right? And when that happens, this thing starts to, you saw it kind of adds up, right? These little tack-ons start to add up. One of the biggest ones is that if you separate gear expenses, right, and you make a percentage off of that to cover some stuff, you separate labor expenses, and what should happen is that the queue you're paying for that are billable hours, which are ones that are going out on site, they should be what's called a net neutral to the company. So what happens is that person goes out enough times per month that essentially they're being paid by somebody else to be working for you. The rest of that money, a percentage of that goes towards the company's profits or to the owners, right? Maybe it's 5% of that goes always towards the owner out of everything that goes out the door, whatever that number might be. And then in addition to that, you should have another percentage of that that goes towards just the pool of money or the pot of money that pays all the people's salaries, right? And then when gear goes out, same thing. A portion of that goes towards paying the expenses of the building you're in, expenses of general maintenance stuff, right? A pot of money should go towards, okay, hey, 1% out of everything that goes out the door needs to go into a different pot of money so that we always have or rebuying gear, right? So yeah, this shows $100,000. I make $100 on that, but that times X amount of shows, a month really adds up. Those are little factors, little things like that you add on. There's formulas for all this. There's also formulas for the labor you have. There's formulas for the hours they're working. When you're in a labor company, there's three main formulas you can use to determine the math. If you guys ever wonder about, let's say, and again, I won't get into the numbers of this just because it's not really what we're talking about, but just to give you a general idea. If you ever go to, let's say, AutoZone, for example, you ever wonder why AutoZone, there's a guy that goes to a computer and pulls up a list and can give you prices? Is because AutoZone in the back has spent time, right? There's a called bean counters, right? He figured out it takes approximately, on average, 3 hours to do this job on this vehicle. That cost is X amount of dollars because it should take my employee this amount of time. The part for that cost is this much. Now we're a dealer of that company, so we get a discount of that, but I'm not going to give you that discount. I'm going to charge you the full price because I have to, right? But I'm still making money off of it because I'm a dealer, so I'm not getting it for that price. Right? That's something they'll do. So now they'll charge you the full cost. They're charging you for the labor, and they've already predetermined the average time it takes to do that. Whether it takes that guy an hour to do it, or it takes the other guy 4 hours to do it, they determine that the average cost and time is 3 hours at one person to do this job. And that's how they get that final number. So when you go to these get your car fixed, a lot of times they have these pre-made numbers for you because someone has sat there and figured out how long it takes for that one person to do that one job, for that one piece of thing. When you go to your manufacturer directly, what's happening there is that you're paying a premium, right? Because they are the direct source. So you're paying more because they're telling you that the guarantee is that this is a certified mechanic who's gone to school, got a certification for these particular vehicles. So you're paying a premium for that, and then you're paying for the essentially I'm going directly to the dealer, right? So I'm not paying an additional fee or add-on. So I'm paying a premium because they have it right here, right now, and they can do it today, which is never the case. But that's what it's supposed to be like. So those little things are factored in the AV world. We kind of just do 5 and 10s. We don't really factor in too much of that stuff. You work your day, you work your hours, you get paid. You go past 10, you get paid X amount of dollars over that. It depends on your rates. But when you own a company, all that stuff has to be factored into it. And there's an accountant person, usually 1 to 2, that's really looking at all those numbers and meeting these metrics so that the company is profitable, right? So if you're getting paid a certain amount of salary and you're not essentially making that off, or you're not working it off, then you're not really a good employee to the company, which is why a lot of times the first ones to go are the ones that are billed, right? So if you're on a salary, it's different. If you're on a salary, that employee has a set number. It doesn't matter the hours that they work because it has a set number, but their job is an important position within the company, right? So now they say, okay, we need to make this much for this person. Usually big enough company will put that money aside for the year. That pays that person off. The hard part about all this is that when you first start off in the industry, or when you first start to do your business, what really ends up happening is that you end up kind of combining all the money and just doing profits versus losses based off of everything: gear, labor, transportation, vendors, rentals. All those things kind of go into one pot of numbers, and you say, okay, I made this much and I lost this much. How do I do this better for next time? You calculate that based off of whatever you want to calculate that off of. That's kind of what Ryan's talking about there. I may have gone a little too deep on it, but I don't want to give all the math stuff out there because that honestly, this is a whole other conversation, and me just kind of touching on it took us down a deep dive. So if that didn't answer somebody's question, though, please let me know. I think I went pretty deep on it.
No, you did a great job. And,
Okay.
and I came from the automotive industry, so I understand how service and billable hours and things go from of the sort. But in a sense, we theoretically have it in our industry as well, because a strike may take us 3 hours to do, 3.5 hours to accomplish. But like you said, we're charging 5 and 10s on average. So a technician will go out and work for 3.5 hours, and the truck is packed, the truck is gone. They can go home, but they're still going to be paid for 5 hours. Why? Why is it like that? Was it because someone said that was said average? But that's industry standards. So the better that you are at your job, and if you can get that 4-hour strike done in 2.5 hours, should you be paid less? Because that same speed will go into account and accommodation when that client is in an issue or in a jam or there's a problem and there's a fire and something needs to be out. They want that same speed right then and there too. Also in the setup, you want that setup. Why? Because it gives us a little bit more time for rehearsals, a time to out a little bit more fires. So with skill set comes that offsetting cost and time as well, which is why I feel that we have those standards.
Definitely. And they're so from my understanding, it used to be that the reason we did 10-hour days was that it was 8 hours of working, right? And then an hour beforehand to do all the pre-pro and stuff, and then an hour afterhand to kind of do the wind down of shutting everything down, getting everybody together, doing a recap of the day. That's, I think, either got lost somewhere down the road or just stopped happening, or maybe the guy that told me that just that's the way he does it, which I thought, oh, I love this way to do it because I wish it happened that way, but it doesn't. But it used to be that, you know, it was always 8-hour day, and then they did the 10-hour days because they wanted that initial first hour to kind of get together, go over the day's plan, figure out positions, figure out who's doing what, get everybody assigned, get all the gear kind of figured and sorted out, make sure everybody was on the same page, and then you'd start 8 hours. And then the last hour was to wind down, see where you're at. Hey, what's left to do tomorrow? Let's make a to-do list for tomorrow. Come back in the morning, we'll tackle that to-do list, or what haven't we done yet, or what are we missing from the client, or what are we missing content-wise, or what are we missing, yada, yada, yada. You know, the list goes on. But it's supposed to be like that wind down of shut everything down, secure everything, anything that's not taped down or whatever, kind of get it ready, that last kind of like wrap up of the day. And then we kind of just changed gears, and it became 10 hours of standard of how we just, you know, we hit the ground running, and we're not done till we're done. And, you know, I mean, everybody does it different too. Like there's a lot of crews where, you know, at least since I've moved up, you know, a lot of companies are getting a little more proficient, as the word I'll use, proficient with their setups and their gears. I've been seeing less and less over the last 5 years a la carting and more package deals, so that this case rolls out, I run my cables out, or this case rolls out, and everything you need is in this case. It's not over here and over there and yada, yada. A lot of the older companies I see, like, you know, 20, 30 years older, they have a la carte stuff, and it's like, where's the switcher? Oh, it's in that case. Okay, got it. Where the odds are in that? Okay, let me go to that. You know, like you're looking for everything
As opposed to rolling out the full build video.
Right. And I think and again, this goes to what Ryan was saying, and I'll try to wrap it up quickly because I know we're about to run out of time. This goes back to Ryan saying, like, the cost of that case, the cost of the rack that I'm building, the cost of the cables in that rack, I will make some of that back eventually, but it's an upfront cost that I have to eat. I can charge for cables, right? Small package, medium package, large package of cabling. I can charge for that. So I'll make some of that back. But that case that I bought, that's my cost, right? I got to eat that cost. The rack that I got to buy to put all this gear in, I got to eat that cost, right? I'll make back the money at some point. But what it does, here's what it does, though, that I think a lot of people miss the mark on. Yes, it'll cost you money. And cases are expensive. If you own a company and you're buying cases, you already know this. Like, cases are expensive. So when you see that guy coming in with that TV in a case, don't be so hard on that company. That case for that TV that costs like $200 is like $1,000. Okay, there's a big price difference. It's like that case breaks, or that monitor breaks. I just buy a new one, right? I'm not gonna work. Anyways, that's another conversation. So what I'm trying to say is that what ends up happening when you do that method is that you end up speeding up your ins and your outs. So now it would take you typically 10 hours, takes you maybe 5 to 6 hours with a team, because I roll in my video stuff, I set it up, I run my cables out, I roll in my CCU, my cameras, right? My cameras come in a case. Everything comes out of that case. It's in the case. I roll in my shader guy. Everything's in that shading rack. So the rack comes up. There's all my monitors, there's all my stuff. I put it on top of the case. I pull out my drawers. Boom, I'm done within an hour maybe, running my cables out. Versus the old way, which is take out each individual CCU, stack it up, find all my cabling, do all my wiring and stuff. No, I'm going to put you a video hub in there. I'm going to put you a back plate, and it's just going to all be plug and play. You come out of this port, goes over there. I'm going to give you every option under the umbrella that you can do with this thing. The back panels have it all there, so my cables, my ports never get messed up, and you're going to just run cables out or run cables in and end of day. But again, the other benefit too to a lot of the newer companies, and Louis just brought this up there too, right? But then it's harder for cross rent an item. So that again, you spend a lot more money on this stuff. It becomes harder to cross rent stuff because now it's kind of a set and go package versus the a la carte way where it's much easier to cross rent. So there's pros and cons to all these things. But again, the benefit for the crew is that you're going to almost always get done within a 10 hour day, and you're going to at least have the benefit of saying, or not saying, sorry, you have the benefit of your load-ins and load-outs to be much quicker, so you can focus more on the engineering of the show and not wiring the show up, which is really like time-consuming when you do it from scratch and you do it a la carte. And I got to find all the pieces. I spend at least an hour trying to find pieces and a couple hours trying to find a cable because I don't want to run a CCU and run 50 footers to go from the bottom to the top one. No, I want to find the shortest cable you got, so my output going to my input is a jumper cable, and I'm not wasting these long ass cables. So my strike has like a spaghetti on the ground because I was like, well, all I found was 50s and 100s. So out of CCU 3 to CCU 1, it's a 100 footer. That's all I found, bro. Sorry. Versus the rack where it's just like, hey, I have 3 cameras. 3 cameras are out there. Cool. Run me these tack, this fiber, this triax, whatever it is you have for your CCU. Run that cable out there. Done. Run me a cable to my monitor. Okay, I'm ready. Now I can engineer it and shade it and get it ready to go and make sure everything's there. Anyways, got about a minute left. Scott, final words for the audience. I'm so sorry, man. I just rambled today.
No, I love what you touched on, the costs of everything. And I think as entrepreneurs or as freelancers or even full-timers, understanding the true cost of what it takes to open a business will help you be a better employee or a freelancer. And it's a lot of times as freelancers, we don't really understand that. We don't understand what it takes to keep the doors open, what it takes to put a show on. And when you start adding every little bit and pieces together, you'd be surprised how quickly that adds up. But, to be a freelancer or to be a full-timer, obviously that's your choice. In my opinion, it kind of depends on what you really want out of life. If you want that security, full-time. If you want that chance to be free and do pretty much what you want to do, then it's freelance. But at the end of the day, it's where do you want to be in terms of your health and your wealth? And depending on what you know and what makes you comfortable and which direction you go to get there. Thank you, Umar.
No, thank you for being here so much with us, Scott. We appreciate it as always. Thank you for coming to part 2. I wish we would have communicated sooner. We had a different plan for today, and then Austin did a mad scramble, and I said, forget it. We're just going to do a part 2. So thank you for being here so much. I apologize I didn't communicate sooner, but your insight is always valuable and insightful, and I really appreciate that you're with us.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Austin, my man, you're much better at words than I am, so I'm going to let you close it out tonight, as always, because you just do such a good job. You're going to wrap this up into a nice little bundled present of just like golden nuggets to get just like raining down on everybody. Like, no pressure, by the way.
Yeah, for real, right? All right, man. So, AB Educate, again, really, really, really great conversation that we had tonight about the differences, the pros and cons of being a 1099 contractor, freelance, versus a W-2 employee. There was a lot of information that was shared in both, and there's upsides to both. There's ways to grow your career in both avenues. So take some time, review this episode again, look back at it closely, and pick up all of the notes that we're giving as to what the upside is to every last one of these categories, what the downside is to every last one of these categories, and kind of rate them, see how they will work for you. There is so much to learn in the industry. There is so much room to grow in the industry. There's so much opportunity out there. All it takes you to take harness of that opportunity and grow. Whether you do it as a freelancer or you do it as a W-2 employee, the opportunity is there for you. And that's why AV Educate is out here for you every week. And we look forward to seeing you again next week, Wednesday, so we can continue growing with you. Have a good night. Take care.